broadcasting from Park Avenue in New York City. Brought to you by Global Wealth Office at Nest Seekers International and Classique Moderne. This is Peace and Good Wealth. Good afternoon, everyone. Colin, Perry, hope all is well. Still recovering from that respiratory issue last week when I lost my voice. But glad to be back in the podcast this week. So let's get right to it. In early 2021, I came across a studio on East 71st and Lexington Avenue, and was drawn to the works of this particular artist. And after a few hours, I ended up buying, one of his pieces called "A River Flows." And at the time, I described this work as, when you see Phillip Michaels' work in person, it's a multitude of scenes unfurling, scenes from an ever-evolving multiverse, limited only by one's own ability to imagine. And so I am extremely pleased to have as our special guest on the Green Couch today, one of the most prolific American artists, Phillip Michaels. Welcome, Phillip.
Thank you, Loy.
So Phillip, you're New York based, right? For anyone who doesn't know you yet, tell us a little bit about your background. You were born and raised is it Chicago?
In Chicago area, yeah.
Yes.
Suburbs.
And then, interesting is that at the age of 18, you went to?
So first I went to Miami initially. Then I went to New York a year later. But I traveled for a few years, those winters, probably 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So an 18-year-old finding oneself, finding direction,
Yeah, I think I was a little restless and a little curious and just wanted to get out and experience things for myself outside of the northwest suburb of Chicago that I was from.
And how did you come to the art world?
Well, I guess it was kind of a slow, progression towards that, where it is now. But India was a big role in kind of that part of my life. I was 21 and I went away for what ended up being about 7 months, 6 months in India, 1 month in Thailand came later, actually. That was in Nepal. And, I guess, I trying to figure out where to go with exactly how it all came about, because it's a long story. But I went back to school and I took an art class at that point.
Mm-hmm. Were you always drawn to art as a child, or did the travel sort of inspire your or start your pathway towards that or I should say trigger the passion for art?
I was into art as a kid. I did some painting, some ceramics, and it was something I liked doing, but it wasn't something I ever saw in my future. I really didn't. I was actually into tennis. That was my kind of a secret passion, because I knew that in some way it was unrealistic to play tennis, but there was a part of me that really wanted that. And I think it's how I built my identity when I was growing up, middle school, high school. Yeah. And
so let's talk about the different places that you've been. Let's talk about sort of like different inspirations. When after during your studies, how did, let's say, visiting and being in India, what type of inspiration did you get from these different? Are they all the same? Are they all together, or were there different parts of the different cultures and the context of where they are? Did they sort of together help create what what you're doing now?
Well, when I went to India, that was really, that actually came after a trip to Hawaii, and at that time, I started to kind of get interested in what I heard was spirituality, and I had read a little bit of this book by Krishnamurti, and then later I sort of started to hear through some friends about someone named Osho, and that's really what I became more drawn to. I think I just connected with it naturally, and so I went to the Osho Meditation Center in Pune, in India, when I was just turned 21, and I guess I was just going to explore and kind of find what's out there, just to kind of get to know the world different than, I basically at that point I had left school I went to my freshman year at the University of Miami, and I left because I didn't feel fully in it. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so traveling was kind of, I bought a one-way ticket, and that was my way to live at that point.
Well, I think so. Between India and Nepal, I would assume that a lot of that, a lot of a lot of things that people would always say that they've always learned is not just the culture, but also the type of spirituality, that is integrated in the life of the people. So not just in religion, but also in everything that they do, from cooking, for instance, and art. There's always that over. But this canopy of spirituality that revolves around, that it revolves around, right? So, and which is, I think, part of what when we talked about, how when you start your work, when you begin to, to paint, we talked about, do you have any concept in mind, before? And I think what you said was that you kind of just let it flow, and it lets you lead. Talk to us a little bit about that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think actually the point you were making, that spirituality is sort of in everything we do. I think that that resonates a lot with me, and I think that's what I started to realize sort of after that trip. I felt like, maybe I was looking for something out there, and then it kind of occurred to me that I didn't need to go anywhere to kind of get more into my own life and my own experience of things. And like you said, you can do that with cooking, you can do that with your work, or with anything that you do. And I think painting has become that, I guess you can say a vehicle. But the way that I can experience myself and the mystery of life that kind of I encounter every day.
Mm-hmm. And with I know that, for instance, when I write, when I'm writing something, part of it I kind of feel is comes out of the ether. It's not something that is contrived. It's somehow you tap into this flow of whatever energy it is, and the better works are the ones where you had no preconceived notion of what it's going to be, and you kind of let it finish. But your work, while a lot of them at surface is similar, they are actually interesting because one. They're both particular and they're universal. So people would look at them, and each one, would see something differently in the same, work than somebody else who's standing next to them. Frequently like a husband or a wife. Or friends would be looking at the same piece and taking something out of it, because the work is. abstract enough, but very specific. It calls to very specific people. When you let's talk about what are how do you create the art? What are the materials that you use? How do you also create a lot? You produce a lot of work, right? You're very, very disciplined. Let's talk about what it is to be an artist. So let's talk first about materials.
Well, I use predominantly acrylic at this point, and I sort of I went through a stage where I was experimenting with all kinds of other materials, charcoal, pastels, even tried oil for a little while. But I actually prefer acrylic because it dries very fast and I paint fast. And I think that's just because it just comes intuitively, and it's an action. I'm painting. Well, any painting is an action, but I'm painting quickly,
right,
relatively. I kind of load up the palette and I just go, and whatever happens. But the main thing is that I stay connected to myself and kind of remember to stay open. I think that's an important part. Sometimes, if I get caught up in knowing too much, if I think that I know too much, that's kind of a recipe for it not flowing as nicely.
Mm-hmm. With clients would commission you to do certain things, right? Let's talk about that because obviously a client's idea of what it would look like. Unless you're, it's easy when it's a portrait, right? There's a portrait, this is the person looks like, you expect that person to look like that. But when it is, with your work, they would explain things to you, and they may choose certain colors, and how easy it is, or how difficult is it to create a commission piece that directly connects with what a client wants.
So usually I try to have a discussion with the person who I'm discussing the commission with about past pieces that I've done that they are most drawn to, and it kind of gives me an idea of they like the work in general, but then we can kind of discuss the particulars, and I try to have a conversation about subtle variations. Mm-hmm. and when I first started doing commissions quite a few years ago, I ran into the obstacle was trying to be too similar to the past work that we were using as an example. What I've come to understand is that the painting is still coming from me, whether it's a commission or it's not, and so I don't need to necessarily do anything differently than I would anyway. I just sort of keep in mind, some details that I know are relevant in this case, but I don't need to copy what I've already done before, and that way, there's still a fresh energy in the work.
It's still new. So let's be controversial a little bit. Are there any commission pieces where you just thought, this is a bad idea, this is not going to turn out very well?
Well, I have to think in particular. I was remembering the one that I did for the project that I did with you for the Central Park
absolutely.
Tower.
Exactly.
And I knew you had this event coming up, or series of events, and you had a project opportunity that I found interesting, and so we discussed doing. Basically, we needed something big, and we didn't have a lot of time. And
I think it delivered in one day.
Yeah, so I was just like,
we were going to
ready.
Fill a 30-foot high, wall, right? And that's that alone, it's a big thing. But also because you have all of these windows and all of the volume of the space, you had to create enough art, enough attraction to the art so that people could see it. but at the same token, not stand out so much so that that's all you see in space itself. And because it's real estate, and that's sort of like the terrible part of real estate is that when we sell, they kind of have to come together. I think in my house, I don't expect my art to go with my decor necessarily, because I pick art because they connect, with me, and that's it. So whether or not this one goes with this particular couch, I don't care. But in real estate, unfortunately, that's important. That's part of the staging, and that's another thing that's different. You had such a big heart, because I asked you, I think 2 days, if you could do it. We went up there. You let me borrow a lot of your work for a very important, if I remember correctly, I think it's a Dom Perignon event with the Culinary Institute of America. So one of the biggest events I could ever have. And I had blank spaces. Not only did you bring in that, but you came in and said, I'm going to do something for that particular wall. And everybody else will tell you, weeks and weeks and weeks. And you gave literally, I think, in a day and a half, you delivered that thing, in time for that wall. And we will show some, I think those pieces, we have photos of that, as well. But I think, that with you, that's the other part of it. It's that you see opportunity where, a lot of people don't. Usually, artists fall into two different categories. One is the very commercial ones where they just want to sell and they don't really care. And then the ones that are too precious, that, selling seems to be sort of like a sellout. And so, but you straddle this very, very fine line of producing work that you're proud of, but at the same time understanding that your work has to sell. Your work has to be owned by people in order for you to continue to do the work that you do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So how do you you travel all over the place? And you deliver and you install yourself, right? How do you manage going from here to Florida? Sometimes you're in DC, or you're in Virginia, you're in all of these different places. And personally delivering these works and hanging it for the new owners. I mean, how do you do that?
I just do it all the time. I travel for the art fairs, I'm not gonna fly necessarily. I mean, I could potentially, but I'm not. Generally, I don't fly somewhere or drive, across state lines too far just for a delivery. But because I'm already in different places doing shows, as long as I'm in the area, it's my pleasure to see the home where the painting is going to be, and sometimes I even offer to bring some pieces over, and we can have a look at how the pieces look, depending on color or size and the space that somebody might be interested in having a painting.
How does it feel, when you hang something, in somebody else's place? I would assume that part of it is like you feel like, these are, your kids, right? It's a product. This is literally something that came out, from you, and you're hanging them in different places. Does it feel what I would expect, to feel like, obviously there's pride. There's also a sense of like, belonging. How does it feel for an artist to get to see your work there?
I think that seeing it come together in the space is very nice. How it relates to the work that somebody's put into their room already, how it connects, and then also how the person is enjoying the piece themselves. And it's really, for me, it's like the painting has a new life, and actually much more life even than just when it's in my studio. I feel like when I'm creating, I actually don't ever think about where it's going to end up. because I just have no idea. And so I'm fully focused on painting that piece, unless somebody showed me the space in advance in those instances. But generally, I just paint. So
So I would assume it's different from seeing your work, hanging in a gallery and you have a show and people are looking at it because, in a gallery or in a show, while it's you're elated because obviously people are seeing it, but people actually hanging it in their home and that being a part of of their lives, right? It's more intimate in a lot of ways.
yeah, definitely. But I will say that at the fairs, because I meet a lot of people who are encountering the work, they do have. There's very nice interactions that I see that people are having, and to be able to have to connect with somebody as they're connecting with the work, to kind of get a sense of what their enjoyment of it. It's also very nice at a fair.
So do you get people who again being controversial, who I see a lot of people even very very old masterpieces that people buy just for decoration. They don't really particularly care about the art. They probably don't look, but they think, okay, this is a very valuable piece. It goes in my place. It's perfectly fine. Do you see? And I see that a lot more now than before. I think when people brought in art, they're able to they appreciate it in some sort of level, not just to hang for decoration, right? Do you But these days, a lot of of the houses that we see are sort of staged, so that you can't even they're all gray and white and same couch and same all of that stuff, and same Tom Ford book and the coffee table, and so they put their art there. Do you see a lot more of the people who buy art, as part of the whole sort of like aesthetic of the place? How much, or is it sort of like balance between those people and the people who really enjoy art?
I think there's a different degree to which somebody is only sort of like, let's say, majority of their focus is on the art versus their people who are sort of focused on the combination of the art and the space. And I think it's great. Interior design and the way that somebody puts together their entire room and their house and their living space is actually a beautiful thing. I did it for the first time just a couple years ago, and I don't know. I think that's also
it's also a legitimate reason, it's well, I remember the way museums curate art. The Barnes Museum, for instance, is something that stands out to me because the art that he had, they're related by a concept that he had, that he had in mind, specific concept that he had in mind. So they are hanging in specific rooms together with a whatever ashtray or a table, because there is this vision of what that room is, which I guess in a lot of ways it's art itself as well. It's part of that. It's a part of the enjoyment of it. So. If somebody's seeing it like we are, for instance, Ken really wanted it to be where he is so that when he turns, he can always see it and admire it, right? It's not just necessarily just for decorations. It functions that way. But, it's also a way for us to connect it, whether they're looking at it from across a kitchen, counter or, going up a staircase, etc. Now, what are the other things that people who are, let's say the people who are looking into getting to the business of art, right? It's not just being an artist, but the business of art. What are things that they should also be conscious about? I mean, discipline is one of them. I mean, you paint you work how many hours a day, and how much do you allocate a day for just doing, and is motivation part of that, or is it just getting started and doing the work?
Well, I don't really allocate time. I just kind of do always. I'm kind of always doing something related to it, unless I just, take a little break here and there. And, but I guess I don't think in terms of, work hours and not. I'm kind of always pretty busy with it. But yeah, I go into my studio pretty much every day when I'm not traveling, and I'm ready to paint every day. And unless I have to work on some applications for a show, or if I'm corresponding, emails, or planning certain things, but otherwise I'm ready to paint. And yeah, I'm always working on stuff. And so yeah, I think that is important for an artist. They have to create,
Right.
give themselves the chance to just physically get working.
Because I think some people, say, there's always been this debate where, some people need to be motivated first. They have to have inspiration first before they could start work. That would be me. And then there are people who just do it, sort of, this is part of it. This is the discipline's part of it. It doesn't have to be all perfect. It doesn't have to be all going somewhere. But, the engine has to keep running, basically, and it gets better and better and better and better. And then from there, you filter out which ones, are really good, which ones, but it's always practice, like tennis, right? You don't get to become a good tennis player without hitting the ball over and over and over and over again, and seeing, and perfecting sort of like your style. You also do a lot of, you have a variety of colors that you choose from. You also have a variety of sort of like different strokes and different styles, etc. Do you just one day come in and say, okay, this is gonna be the sort of like this shade of whatever, or or do you have it all open and just whatever comes to mind is what you start to work on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some framework for how I work. I mean, I do start. Well, I have certain sizes that I work with, but regarding the actual the painting, the colors is my starting point. I'll have a general sense where I'm going with it, and then what happens during it is that needs to kind of have a spontaneous element to it. So, I'm not too precise, but I guess it's a degree. I'm open to variations happening, and even just the subtle way that the brush is moving. I just try to stay very much open to that what's happening right there. And
Right.
then, yeah.
And so, do you have inspirations in the art world? Do you look at other people's art and say, that's really good? And are there people that you particularly like? Contemporary artists or masters that you draw from?
Well, I mean, can talk about famous artists, or can talk about artists that I see when I'm out in the world today that are not necessarily they're not famous like that. And I find it I was very, I guess for the first thing, I was very drawn to Impressionists first, and then abstract expressionists. So that's when I was first starting with art. I was actually more into drawing portraits, and as I got into abstract, I was drawn to a lot of the mid-century abstract expressionist artists. But I will say that when I'm at art fairs, or even in people's houses and see other art, it's really beautiful to see what other art is out there and that people are creating, because it's so different from what I know and what I'm doing. I mean, what I paint comes from inside, and I don't even really think of it like it's like I'm choosing that. I'm just painting what's natural for me. But every artist, has what's natural for them, and so it's actually really fun to walk around, because a lot of times I'm focused on presenting my own work, But when I can take the opportunity to walk around and experience other art, I can really get into it, and I should do it more, actually.
Well, there are two questions I wanted to ask. One is that you know, how do you know if somebody's looking at your work, what is your sort of like the simplest way to explain what your work is to somebody who's not seen it before?
Well, that would be interesting if what they would imagine based on my explanation. But what I would say is, usually I just in a most general sense call it abstract, but abstract can be many different things.
Exactly.
It is kind of a flow of colors and brushstrokes. It's kind of energy and just life.
I understand. I know your work, so I totally understand. And also, don't you have a family member that's also an artist?
Yeah, my brother, he's an artist.
Yeah. So, do you bump into each other a lot in the fairs? But his art is very different from yours, right?
Yeah, it is different. He works with crystal primarily, Swarovski crystals, and he designs all kinds of things that he uses those on. He has wearable pieces, shoes, jewelry, clothing, and he does sculptural items, and he does wall pieces. So he is constantly coming up with new things. He's based in LA, and he goes by the Dan Life.
Okay. So, so one last thing. I know that the end of of every piece is when the title comes to you, and we've talked about this. It's not. You don't know what that is until most of the time, I think, until at the end of the piece, and all of a sudden, okay, that's what it's named, right? So how does that happen again? So you've finished the piece, and
so we must have talked about that a couple years ago because it's actually changed a little bit since then. I remember early, like probably before I met you, I actually didn't really have many titles. And then it started to occur to me something that I was inspired by or that something that was significant to me in my experience of painting, but it came towards the end. And in the last maybe 2 years, it started to happen throughout the painting and sometimes even before I start. So I just kind of keep notes of, just jot down a couple words or word, just whatever comes to mind. And usually it's very specific to just where I'm at that moment.
It's basically the message of that work coming through, whether it's in the beginning or in the middle or at the end, at the end of the work. And it's just part of that flow of energy that we don't know why, we don't know how it all comes about, but it's in a lot of ways it's named itself through the message.
Yeah, sometimes it's very specific too, very clear. And if I don't write it down right away, I often won't remember it, even possibly a minute or two later, 5 minutes later. So I make it kind of a point to try to write it down if it seems relevant.
So do you some people have bodies of work. They work on certain things, certain styles, etc. And then, they begin and they end. Are you just continuing to see how your art evolves? Or are you planning to kind of like change bodies of work at some point in the future?
I'm not really planning too much of change. I just kind of I think there is an evolution that happens little by little. If I look back a year, 2, 3, I can see noticeable differences. But yeah, I'm just kind of painting and staying, just seeing where it goes.
Well, we certainly wish that you will keep continuing to paint, and I know that Ken and I are all, we're your biggest fans.
Thank you.
And continue to paint, continue to be as successful as you are. And with that, thanks again, Phillip Michaels, for sharing your art and your wisdom. Please follow Philip in Instagram, Phillip Michaels Art, and follow us also on your social media platforms. On behalf of Kenneth Moore, Colin Megley, and Perry Law, this is Loy Carlos wishing you peace and good wealth.